it didn't go as well as I planned. I froze on the first section, which was logic games. And I know from previous experience with my practice test, I was getting around 10 wrong, but I thought I could win it. Turns out that was not possible. It's something about my speed and my accuracy that is not going well.
Sure. But you've got the foundation. You have the basic familiarity. I guess the question for me is I'm going to bring in something that you emailed me about. You said that your plan is to do 8 hours a day between now and January.
Yeah. And it's been working out.
How long have you been doing it for?
A week because after that LSAT, I said I have to really dedicate time to this. So I've been doing that ever since my LSAT November 14th. I think it was November 14th I took it.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah. But basically, it was interesting to me that you've done it for like a week or so, maybe two, and you've got about 2 months, a little less, until January.
Yeah. Is that possible to boost the score in that time?
You can certainly boost it. My question is, will the 8 hours a day be sustainable for you?
I think so, because I'm not working right now. So, I mean, I could dedicate that time. It could be a little bit strenuous, but I'm really dedicated to make it work.
I don't doubt it. And I believe that you could. The question to me is whether you should. And so what do those 8 hours look like?
So before you sent me the schedule, I was doing it sporadically. So honestly, I didn't have a framework. So that's why I signed up, because it wasn't going as best as I thought, because I was doing mixed review. So I was doing reading comp, logic games, going over my books again, just mixing it up. But today I went over the schedule you did, and I'm going to focus on the logic games for the next 2 weeks and follow that schedule. So it feels a little bit more structured, because last time, like for the last week, it hasn't been structured, and I didn't know where to really start.
Structure is key, no question about it. Doing 8 hours a day of logic games alone sounds brutal to me. I mean, I don't know if you've actually done it yet in that way, but I wouldn't commit to the 8 hours a day and I would instead suggest you see what changes as it unfolds. And the question, I guess, is why do you need 8 hours specifically? Is it because you just think more is better?
I want to get to the 170s. So if I'm getting like about 10 wrong per section, it's like low 150s, mid 150s, right? So I thought more time means more, I guess, learning, but I don't know if it will pan out. I'm hoping it does.
How do you study in the lead up to November?
Sporadically, like 3-4 hours a day. And I noticed I didn't work on my technique. So that's when I got to games and stuff like logical reasoning. It's like I'm not seeing the pattern, so I would take extra time to do the things I would do, and it would take too long for me. So I had to get my technique down better, because it's not good. But I'm noticing with, I guess for even today, just going through your video with, for example, sequencing, that is a technique that makes me go through that sequencing game. So I'm like, okay, like if I get these foundations correct, I could work better with my accuracy and my speed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, there's concepts, there's technique, and then there's application. Mm-hmm. And you've got to have elements of both.
Yeah.
That I'm certain of. What I'm not certain of is how much of that you need in one particular day.
How much do you recommend?
Depends on your schedule. I'm guessing that if you have 8 hours a day to study, you probably don't have too many other obligations.
No. Yeah.
So you could do 5, you could do 6. To me, it's not really about the number of hours. It's about what exactly it is that you're doing.
Gotcha.
Sporadic doesn't sound great to me, because you want to have momentum. You want to be maximizing what you can reasonably put in.
Okay.
But everything has limits. So there's reasonable and then there's unreasonable.
Okay. So 8 is unreasonable. Okay.
In my view, it is. I mean, of course, there could be exceptions. There could be people it works for. But I guess the question is why you would necessarily need that much and what else might suffer along the way. Have you ever devoted 8 hours a day of studying to anything?
No. Yeah. Okay. It makes more sense when you put in that perspective.
I mean, what about other, I
Makes more
mean, let's
sense.
say put studying aside. What about training for a marathon? What about a triathlon?
You'll get, tired,
Yeah,
basically.
same
Right?
same principle here. I mean, your brain has limits too, and what you can, the mental focus that you need for the LSAT can be exhausting.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, think about the pre-flex in-person LSAT was 5 sections, 35 minutes, gives you around 3.5 hours. Flex is only 2 hours.
Hmm.
So 8 hours is like doing 4 flexes
Okay.
in a day. I mean, obviously the nature of the work is different, but it's still LSAT content.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So what would you recommend my study schedule look like? If I want to jump 15 points, like what would you recommend I do in the next 2 months?
Good question. I mean, so let's say if you wanted to jump 15 points, how would that differ from wanting to jump 20 points or 25 points or 10 points? What changes?
Nothing really.
Exactly. So if you want to improve, what do you have to do?
Just keep on working, right?
Well, just keep on working, but working specifically how? You said, okay, well, there's sporadic on one end,
Structured.
structured on the other end, you know. So there's concepts and techniques, then there's application of those concepts and techniques. And obviously, you want to have a number of examples to start seeing the patterns. But after a certain point, it becomes diminishing marginal returns. Do you really need that 30th or 50th example? It could be a nice to have. And with a long enough timeline, I'd say yes, do it if you can. If you were studying for the LSAT 6 months from now, I certainly think you should do more examples than if you're taking it 2 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's diminishing marginal returns. So put in what you can put in while also maximizing quality of life, sleep, diet, exercise, relaxation. Those are all really important. Even if you put in 8 hours a day of studying, if you were then burnt out, exhausted, or if you knew it well, but you were hungover, that would make a difference, right? If you did it second after you rolled out of bed, that would make a difference. If you did it at midnight, if you're tired, that would make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So I definitely would shorten my hours and try to work more efficiently with that because that seems more doable than what I was doing because I realized like I may not have a social life for the next 2 months. And I was ready for that. But this seems more doable. Okay.
You have the space for a social life, by the way. I mean, maybe during COVID, it's more limited than otherwise. But if you have nothing but time, when I said, like I said, sleep, diet, exercise, relaxation, socializing can be part of that.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely take that into consideration. Okay.
We talked about structure. The study plan I gave you to use with the course, that gives you structure in terms of what to do. Then as a side note, there's also how you structure your day.
Yeah.
And so if you want to avoid the sporadic, if you want to avoid losing focus, then you can also structure your individual daily plan. So, okay, well, study from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., take a break for lunch, study again from 1 to 4. That's 6 hours. But before 9 a.m., after 4 p.m., you're pretty free. During lunch, you're pretty free. You can have it all given a full-time study plan.
Yes, true. Okay. So that definitely makes me smile. Definitely take that in consideration. I guess now I want to talk about my problem areas.
Sure.
So last night I actually figured out I was having trouble with necessary and sufficient questions. And last night I figured out with the help of your videos and help of Reddit that necessaries are just must be true questions. And for some reason I did not see that for months. So it was a big revelation. So I ended up getting a lot of those that I did right. I guess I want to focus on sufficient questions now. And I know it's like extra information you take. It could be extra information to make the premise and the conclusion work to close the gap. What would you recommend for sufficient questions?
Well, there's formulas underlying that question type. It's one of the few logical reasoning questions that I would consider diagramming. And when I walk through how to do those, I focus on the formulas. I found 6 major categories into which nearly every sufficient assumption question falls. And I taught a class on this recently. I can send you the link. It's just titled Sufficient Assumption Workshop in the course. And it's a full-length class going over all those formulas. with different drills and such. And so I would say take a look at that.
Okay. And then going from there, strengthen questions always throw me for a loop as well. Like, again, sometimes I have trouble finding the gap and then strengthening that gap or strengthening the premise or whatever it is. What's your recommendation on that?
Well, pre-phrasing can be useful. You want to engage with the argument in a real world way. There are a couple of major categories of strengtheners. So for example, if the argument's based upon a study or a survey, if you defend the study against potential problems, like let's say they didn't use a representative sample or they didn't use a control group, those are things that matter. Mm-hmm. So if you say, well, they did use a representative sample, they did use a control group, and the argument's based on the validity of that study, anything you do to help the validity of the study will help the argument.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So defending and helping the argument.
Yeah, so you're like basically you're protecting the argument from potential problems it could have been guilty of and saying, oh no, they're good on that. That wasn't a problem. That wasn't an issue.
Okay.
I have a whole full class on that as well, by the way. So
yeah, I saw like a snippet of it on YouTube, and then since I've joined the course, I see that. So I'm definitely going to take a look at that. Next thing, matching games. I always freeze because I always worry I don't have enough time to get it done, and I feel like it takes a lot of time, so I always end up skipping it and coming back. What do you recommend for those?
Drill them. I have all the different logic games types categorized, and so you can do a bunch in a row to see the commonalities or patterns between them in terms of how to approach. And then, for everyone on YouTube, I've put out my video explanations for the vast majority of logic games, and so you can watch the related video explanation after trying it out on your own to see how I might go about it.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I guess the same goes for how argument employs or precedes questions. Like, it's just, are you getting used to the logical reasoning jargon or the way that they speak? Because sometimes I don't know the difference between an answer because the way they word it, it's really confusing. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, so you got to get used to the abstract language.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get used to the abstract language. And so looking up any terminology you're not comfortable with, any phrases you're not comfortable with, even for the wrong answer choices, defining that on the side if you encounter things you don't understand. I'm actually doing a class tomorrow night on role of statement questions, which are very closely tied to method of reasoning because they're abstract in nature. You're identifying things about the argument rather than doing anything to the argument, but it can feel a little bit technical sometimes. And so in tomorrow night's class, I'm going to walk through this with several examples. And one thing I like to do that I haven't seen other people do is I'll actually take other stimuli that are not from that question and say, how can we analyze that as if it were a role of statement question or as if it were a method of reasoning question?
Perfect. Okay. And then reading comp, speed, accuracy. How do you suggest I go about that?
The biggest thing I'll say is dumbing down the passage. Part of what slows you down on reading comp is when you get bogged down in the terminology, bogged down in the details of what they're talking about. And so anything you can do to make the topic of the passage more relatable and more interesting can be really useful to help you get through it faster and have something you can associate with in your mind related to the topic of the passage. And so that involves making up your own weird little analogies or examples that maybe only you would get. But so what? You're doing this for your own purposes. So I'd always look to caricature or exaggerate the topic or the viewpoints being presented so you can really hold on to those instead of whatever terminology they're using. Okay. Same is true for logical reasoning, by the way.
Okay. So if it's like a tough econ passage, I don't like econ, but if it's a tough econ passage, just dumb it down or make it seem like I like it, perhaps.
Exactly. You got to fool yourself into liking it, fooling yourself into getting excited about it or getting interested in it. And so one class format I've been playing with a lot the past few months are reading comprehension deep dives, where we'll spend an entire hour just going over one reading comprehension passage. We may not even get to the questions, but those 450 or so words, we'll go in depth on those sentence by sentence, word by word, breaking it down. I've done probably 5 or 6 of those at this point. They're all inside the course. You can watch those recordings. And then I think I'll be doing another one of those next week. And so you can look at that then and attend then and come on in and benefit from it and ask your questions too.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have.
Awesome, Natalie. Well, it was really great connecting with you. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
Definitely the timing. So I thought like the amount of time I put in will equal the amount of points I gain. But seeing just working efficiently and working with structure could definitely make a big difference. It doesn't matter the time because you can work 8 hours and work sporadically, like what I was doing last week, and it didn't feel good. So I'm definitely going to take your advice into consideration and incorporate it into how I study.
Awesome. Fantastic, Natalie. Well, again, great speaking with you, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.